Lieutenant Mira Drake pressed her back against the cold metal of an alien ruin, the foreign air stinging her lungs. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint hum of machinery deep beneath the surface. In the low, copper-hued light of Hadria's twin moons, she could see her reflection in the sleek, polished surface of her rifle. She kept her breathing steady, listening intently for any sign of movement from the patrol that had just passed. This mission was a gamble, but she knew Earth's survival was worth any risk. "Clear?" a voice whispered beside her. Mira turned slightly, catching the familiar glint of Eli Voss's eyes under his visor. Eli had been her second-in-command for years, a tech genius with a sharp tongue and a knack for keeping her grounded. She nodded, gesturing for him and the rest of the squad to advance. Behind them were Leo, the youngest and least experienced, but sharp and eager, and Martinez, a stone-faced veteran who rarely spoke but followed orders to the letter. "We've got a window," Mira murmured. "Move, but stay low. Remember, they catch us here, and it's game over." They crept forward, weaving between the towering alien structures that cast jagged shadows in the eerie moonlight. The Hadrians, the ruling species on this forsaken planet, were notoriously methodical, always on patrol, always watching. Myra's squad had one objective: locate and disable a hidden Hadrian weapon capable of reaching Earth from across the galaxy. This wasn't a scouting mission, it was a final attempt to stop humanity's looming extinction. They stopped at the edge of a clearing, the colossal silhouette of a Hadrian facility looming ahead. Its structure pulsed with an unnatural light, casting shades of green and purple across the barren landscape. Mira raised her hand, signaling them to hold position. She glanced at Eli, who was already interfacing with his wrist-mounted scanner. "Give me something, Eli," Mira said, her voice low and tense. Eli's fingers flew over the device, the screen flickering as it processed data from the alien frequencies. "Sensors are a nightmare. But this place, it's more than just a weapons cache. I'm picking up energy readings that don't match anything we've seen. It's alive, almost. Like it's feeding off the planet's core." Leo shifted uncomfortably, his voice a hushed murmur. "You're saying it's alive?" Mira shot him a reassuring look. "Focus, Leo. Whether it's alive or not, it's a threat. And it's our job to shut it down." They continued forward, weaving through the shadows as they drew closer to the facility's main entrance. The doors were enormous, covered in alien symbols that pulsed faintly, and the faint hum of energy grew louder with each step. Mira motioned for them to halt, her senses on high alert. "Eli, any way to disable those doors?" Eli examined the alien symbols, his brow furrowing as he traced the patterns with his scanner. "Give me a minute. These controls don't exactly come with a user manual." They waited, the silence around them intensifying. Myra's grip on her rifle tightened, her heart pounding as she scanned the area for any signs of Hadrian patrols. Each second felt like an eternity, the pressure mounting as she imagined the weapon inside that could decimate her home. Finally, Eli stepped back. "Got it. I think I can." A sudden click echoed through the air, and the doors began to grind open with a low rumble. Myra's heart lurched. They had no choice but to push forward. The longer they lingered, the closer they came to being discovered. "Move in," she ordered, and the team slipped inside. The interior of the facility was unlike anything they'd seen. Alien architecture loomed around them, with structures that twisted and curved in impossible ways. Columns of light pulsed up the walls, casting strange shadows across the floors. The air was thick, charged with an energy that made Myra's skin prickle. Eli let out a low whistle. "Feels like we're walking into the belly of the beast." Mira nodded, her senses heightened. "Stay sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with." They moved cautiously down a winding corridor, the hum of alien machinery echoing around them. The facility seemed to pulse, each beat of energy resonating through their bodies. Mira could feel her nerves tautening, a strange awareness settling over her. She knew they were being watched. At the end of the corridor, they reached a large, circular chamber. In the center, a massive structure floated, rotating slowly, covered in the same symbols they had seen on the doors. It emitted a blinding, pulsating light that made it difficult to look directly at it. This was the core, the heart of the weapon. Leo stepped forward, awe and terror in his gaze. This thing could end us all. Myra's jaw tightened. Not if we do our job. She looked at Eli. We need a way to overload it. Think you can manage? Eli studied the structure, his fingers already tapping on his device. I'll try. But if I mess this up, it could take us all out. Do it, Mira commanded, her voice firm. We're not leaving here until this thing is dead. As Eli worked, Mira kept her eyes on the entrance, her senses stretched to their limits. Every creak, every flicker of light felt like a threat waiting to spring. Just as Eli seemed to make progress, a shiver ran down Myra's spine, a feeling she couldn't ignore. A low, guttural growl echoed from the corridor behind them. Mira turned, heart pounding, as a Hadrian soldier appeared in the doorway, its glowing eyes fixed on them, assessing, calculating. Its stance radiated cold, unyielding aggression. Eli, she whispered, her voice tense. We've got company. He didn't look up. I need another minute. Mira steadied her rifle, aiming it at the soldier. You've got 30 seconds. The Hadrian's gaze shifted, a predatory gleam in its eyes as it stalked forward. Myra's squad tightened their formation, each member's face etched with determination. They had come too far to fail now. This was their last chance, Earth's last chance. The Hadrian snarled, its guttural voice filling the chamber. Mira took a deep breath, steadying herself. She glanced back at Eli, who nodded, a signal that he was almost ready. Hold the line, she whispered to her team. No matter what. The Hadrian lunged, and Mira fired. The sound of the Hadrian's heavy fall reverberated in the chamber, as Mira lowered her rifle, eyes scanning the shadows for more threats. The air was thick with the scent of burned ozone, a reminder of just how close they had come to losing this fight. She turned, watching as Eli took a final look at the core's control panel, a faint glow reflecting on his face. The tension in his jaw revealed his focus, and the pressure they all felt. Any luck, Eli? Mira asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. Barely got anything. I managed to scramble some of their internal sensors, but it's a temporary fix. Eli replied, his tone sharper than usual. We've bought ourselves a little time, but not much. Leo glanced over, shifting uneasily. How much time, exactly? Eli met his gaze, hesitating. Enough to get in and out if we're fast. Not enough if they know we're here. Mira stepped between them, her expression firm. Then we stay quick, efficient, and silent. We're moving to the core, and we don't stop until this place is shut down. They regrouped and advanced further down the corridor, moving as one through the dimly lit maze. The walls hummed with a rhythmic energy, and strange symbols etched into the metal seemed to pulse, as if alive. Each step took them deeper into the heart of the Hadrian facility, a place built to repel, designed to intimidate. But Mira had no time for fear, and neither did her team. Can't shake the feeling that this place is aware, Leo muttered, keeping his voice low. Eli shot him a wry look. You and me both, kid. If we weren't risking our necks, I'd say it's almost impressive. Mira cut in, her tone brisk. Focus, both of you. Impressive or not, this place is a threat. Remember why we're here. Their whispers faded into silence as they reached a circular chamber illuminated by a strange blue light emanating from above. In the center, the core hovered, a twisting column of raw energy that radiated a power Mira had never felt before. It pulsed in sync with the facility, sending vibrations through the floor and into her bones. Stay alert, Mira instructed. This is what we came for. They spread out, assessing the room. Martinez took position near the entrance, his rifle raised and his gaze sharp, prepared to intercept any uninvited guests. Leo moved to the core's left side, watching Eli as he examined the control panels that lined the room. Eli's fingers skimmed over the alien symbols, his expression taut with concentration. This thing's encrypted beyond anything I've ever seen. Whatever they've done here, they've hidden it deep. Mira crossed her arms, her eyes fixed on the core. Can you bypass it? Maybe, Eli replied, voice taut. But it'll take time. A sudden alarm blared, cutting through the silence like a knife. Red lights flared, painting the chamber in ominous flashes. Myra's heart raced, and she saw Eli's face drain of color. They're onto us, he said, fingers flying across the control panel. Mira didn't hesitate. Martinez watched that entrance. Leo, cover Eli. We're holding this ground until we can get the core down. The blaring sirens and flashing lights stirred something primal in Mira. This was it. No fallback, no retreat. She could feel the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her, but her resolve hardened. Footsteps echoed down the corridor outside, growing louder with each passing second. The sound of Hadrian soldiers approaching was unmistakable. Mira glanced over at Eli, whose fingers moved with controlled urgency, his face locked in fierce concentration. Eli, she barked. How close are we? Working on it, he snapped, not breaking his focus. His voice had an edge she'd only heard in their direst moments. Leo stood beside him, hands clenched around his weapon, eyes flicking nervously between the corridor and Eli's screen. I'll cover you, Eli. Just get us out of here. Mira met Martinez's steady gaze and nodded. They braced themselves as shadows appeared in the doorway, tall, armored figures with glowing eyes. Hadrians. The first Hadrian stepped forward, its piercing gaze locking onto Mira. It raised a strange, iridescent weapon, and Mira moved before it could fire, shooting with precision honed by years of battle. The Hadrian dropped, but two more took its place. The chamber erupted into chaos. Mira and Martinez held their ground, laying down fire to prevent the Hadrians from advancing. The alien soldiers moved with unnerving coordination, their bodies fluid and silent even in the midst of combat. A stray shot struck the control panel beside Eli, sending sparks flying. Eli flinched but held his position, stubbornly typing into the console. Mira, I need more time. Hold tight, Eli, she yelled, her voice firm. We're not going anywhere. The Hadrians pressed forward, and Mira felt her strength waning. They were relentless, advancing no matter how many fell. Leo let out a strangled cry as one got too close, and Mira watched as he fired, the determination in his young face unyielding despite the terror. Through the gunfire and chaos, Mira noticed a shift in the core's light. It dimmed, flickered. She glanced at Eli, whose face lit with a brief, triumphant smile. Got it! I've initiated an overload sequence. We have 3 minutes before this place blows. 3 minutes? Not much time, but enough. Mira shouted over the noise. Fall back! We're getting out of here! They began a retreat, moving quickly but cautiously as the Hadrians continued their pursuit. The facility shuddered, groaning as the core's power destabilized. The walls pulsed erratically, lights flickering in and out. The hum that had once felt like a heartbeat was now a frantic, dissonant drumbeat. Martinez led the way, his face set in grim determination as he laid down covering fire. Leo followed, eyes wide but steady, adrenaline driving his every step. Eli stayed close to Mira, his usual calm cracking under the weight of their shared urgency. They burst back into the main corridor, sprinting for the exit as the facility began to tear itself apart. The alien structure trembled, fragments of metal and circuitry falling around them. The air grew hot, thick with the smell of scorched machinery and the metallic tang of failure. As they neared the entrance, a final Hadrian figure blocked their path, its eyes glowing with fury. It raised its weapon, but Mira was faster, unloading her last rounds into its chest. It fell, but not before Mira caught a flicker of recognition in its gaze, a silent promise that this wasn't the end. They broke through the facility's outer doors and stumbled onto the barren landscape outside. Behind them, the Hadrian facility convulsed, and with a resounding boom, it imploded, sending debris and dust into the air. The ground beneath them trembled, but Mira and her team stood resolute, watching as the threat to Earth was finally extinguished. Mira exhaled, relief mingling with exhaustion. She glanced at her team, bruised, bloodied, but alive. Let's go home, she said, voice filled with quiet pride. They turned away from the smoking ruin, leaving behind the echoes of battle as they headed back toward the safety of their dropped ship. But as they moved, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that their victory had come at a cost they were yet to understand. The dropped ship's interior hummed as Mira leaned against the metal hull, staring at the stars blurring past the viewport. The thrill of victory had faded, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. She glanced at her team, each member seated quietly, their faces marked by exhaustion and contemplation. Eli was hunched over his wrist-mounted device, fingers tapping out data as he reviewed the mission's outcome. Leo sat opposite him, his gaze vacant, as if trying to process the events they had survived. Martinez, as always, was composed, though his hand rested on his weapon, a subtle signal that he was ready for anything. Breaking the silence, Mira addressed her team. "Good work out there. That wasn't an easy run, but we got the job done." Her voice held a note of reassurance, though her own unease simmered beneath the surface. Eli looked up from his device, a faint frown on his face. "We may have shut down that facility, but there was something strange about it. I've been going over the readings I took. Those energy signatures weren't typical. They were adaptive." Myra's gaze sharpened. "Adaptive? Explain." Eli hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The core wasn't just a power source. It was reacting to us, almost like it could sense our presence. I think it was built to adjust based on intruders' actions, learning and adapting as we moved through the facility. We may have stopped this weapon, but I doubt it was the only one." The thought struck a nerve. They'd barely escaped with their lives from one facility. If there were more, Earth was in greater danger than they'd realized. Mira clenched her fists, the weight of their mission's implications pressing down on her. Leo's voice broke her thoughts. "So, we didn't actually stop them?" Mira shook her head. "We crippled one piece of their arsenal, but this fight isn't over. They're preparing for something bigger. We need to warn Command and get the upper hand before they launch whatever it is they're planning." The drop ship jolted slightly as it entered Earth's atmosphere, and the team fell silent, each lost in thought. When they landed, Command was waiting, a sense of urgency palpable in the air. General Kerr, a seasoned leader with a presence that demanded respect, approached them with a steely gaze. "Lieutenant Drake, report," he ordered, his tone brisk. Mira stood tall, recounting the details of their mission. "Sir, the Hadrians have a new kind of adaptive weaponry. The core we destroyed wasn't just a power source, it was responsive. There's a high probability they have similar installations across the sector." Kerr's expression darkened, his mouth set in a grim line. "We suspected they were developing something advanced, but it's beyond our projections. They're evolving, adapting faster than we anticipated." He looked at the team, his eyes cold and calculating. "I'll need a full debrief in an hour. We're escalating our defense measures immediately." As the general turned away, Mira felt a chill. The enemy wasn't just a force of strength, it was a thinking, learning organism with every intention of crushing humanity. And the realization struck her with a fierce clarity. They were running out of time. The team made their way to the debriefing room, where the walls were lined with digital maps and hollow projections. Bright red markers signified potential Hadrian bases across the galaxy. Eli's fingers danced over the console, pulling up schematics, relaying data gathered from the mission. Leo leaned in, eyes widening as he took in the scale of the threat. "There are so many. We only scratched the surface." Myra's jaw tightened. "If the Hadrians have more of these adaptive cores, they could launch a coordinated strike. Earth wouldn't stand a chance." Eli nodded solemnly. "The tech I saw in that core, it's like nothing I've encountered. If they're leveraging adaptive AI, they're playing a long game. It's not just about strength, they're using strategy, real, evolving strategy." The room fell silent, the weight of the situation sinking in. Every face around the table mirrored the same dread Mira felt in her gut. But her resolve hardened. She couldn't allow fear to dictate their course. "Then we get ahead of it," Mira said, breaking the silence. Her voice was firm, laced with determination. If they're adapting, we adapt faster. We analyze everything we brought back, find patterns, weaknesses, anything that gives us an edge. Martinez spoke for the first time, his deep voice calm yet unwavering. Then we take the fight to them, on our terms. Make them regret setting foot on our turf. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. For the first time since the mission, Mira felt a spark of hope. They were a small force, but they had something the Hadrians didn't: human ingenuity, and a willingness to fight for survival. After the debrief, Mira walked the empty corridors of the base, the hum of distant machinery her only companion. She found herself outside the viewing bay, where the vastness of space stretched endlessly before her, speckled with stars and the dark promise of unknown worlds. Eli joined her, his usual sarcasm softened. "Thinking of taking on the whole galaxy by yourself, Mira?" A faint smile touched her lips. "If I have to, yes." He chuckled softly, though his tone turned serious. "You know, they say humanity has always thrived on the edge of extinction. It's in our DNA to fight when the odds are impossible." She nodded, her gaze distant. "I just wonder, how many times can we beat the odds?" Eli shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "As many times as it takes." They stood in silence, the vastness of space reflecting in their eyes. This wasn't just another skirmish. It was a battle for their very existence. And for the first time, Mira felt a mix of fear and hope intertwining, an uncertain future filled with both peril and possibility. Just as they turned to leave, the comm system crackled to life. "Lieutenant Drake, report to command. We have new intelligence on the Hadrian threat. Possible sighting near Mars." Myra's pulse quickened. The fight was far from over. "Let's gear up," she said to Eli, her voice a blend of determination and resolve. "Looks like we're needed on the front lines sooner than expected." They exchanged a nod, a silent promise that no matter how dark the path, they would face it together. As they moved swiftly down the corridor, the echoes of their footsteps marked the beginning of humanity's retaliation, a warning to the stars that Earth would not fall quietly. The command deck was alive with a tense energy as Mira and her team prepped for what could be their final mission. Screens displayed incoming data feeds from Mars, the site of the newly discovered Hadrian base. Strategists and analysts whispered in hurried tones, their faces set in grim determination. Every moment counted. Mira glanced around, taking in the sight of Earth's best minds and soldiers in one room. The weight of the mission pressed on her shoulders, but she refused to let it show. This wasn't the time for doubt. "Lieutenant Drake." General Kerr's voice cut through the chatter, bringing immediate silence. "You and your team are leading this assault. We can't afford to let them dig in any deeper on Mars. The longer we wait, the stronger they'll get." Mira nodded, her gaze steady. "Understood, sir. We'll strike fast and hard." Kerr gave her a nod, his respect evident. "You're heading into unknown territory. The Hadrians know we're coming, so they'll be ready. You and your team have authorization to use any means necessary to neutralize the threat." Mira caught Eli's eye, and he gave her a grim smile. "Well, guess they finally let us take the kid gloves off." They exchanged a knowing glance. It was a rare opportunity, to fight without restriction, to unleash everything humanity had against this relentless foe. Mira felt a surge of determination and pride in her team. They were Earth's last hope, and she would make sure every Hadrian felt their resolve. The drop ship's descent onto Mars was silent, each team member mentally preparing for the impending assault. The stark, red Martian landscape spread out beneath them, jagged and desolate, with the Hadrian base emerging like an unnatural scar against the rust-colored terrain. As they landed, Mira issued her commands, voice steady and sharp. "Martinez, take point. Eli, you're on tech. Leo, you've got Overwatch. Let's do this clean and fast." The team moved out, weaving between the rocky outcrops as they closed in on the Hadrian base. Mira could feel the familiar tension knotting in her stomach, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the mission. Every step closer brought new dangers. They were entering a hostile territory that wasn't just alien but adaptive. The Hadrians had anticipated their arrival. They reached the outer perimeter, where the Hadrian's defensive barriers hummed with an eerie, fluctuating energy. Eli quickly assessed the system, his fingers flying over his interface. "These defenses are more sophisticated than anything we've seen," he muttered, frustration clear in his voice. "They're analyzing our approach, adapting, just like before." Mira leaned in, her gaze intense. "Can you break through?" Eli's lips tightened. "I'll need a few minutes. Keep me covered." Martinez and Leo positioned themselves, eyes locked on the entrance. The Martian wind whistled, carrying the faint scent of iron and dust, filling the silence between each breath. Mira gripped her rifle, scanning the horizon. Her senses were heightened, every sound, every shadow a potential threat. A flicker of movement caught her eye, and she motioned to the team. "Incoming!" 2 Hadrian soldiers emerged from the shadows, moving with that unsettling, fluid grace that marked their kind. Mira didn't hesitate. She raised her weapon and fired, the shot echoing across the barren landscape. Martinez followed suit, their fire precise and relentless. One Hadrian fell, its body collapsing with a strange, silent grace, but the second soldier adjusted, adapting to their attack pattern almost instantly. It returned fire, and Mira barely had time to dive behind a boulder, as energy bolts scorched the ground where she had stood. "Eli, we need that barrier down!" she shouted, her voice taut with urgency. "Almost there," he replied, fingers dancing over his device, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked against the clock. Leo took a steady breath and fired, his shot finding its mark in the Hadrian's armor, slowing it just long enough for Mira to land the final blow. The alien dropped, and a brief silence settled. "Barriers down!" Eli called, pulling Myra's attention back to the mission. "We've got a way in, but they'll know we're coming." "Then let's not disappoint them," Mira said, her voice fierce. "Move!" They pushed through the barrier and into the Hadrian base, navigating the dimly lit corridors that pulsed with an unnatural green glow. The facility was eerily silent, the only sound their soft footsteps and the distant hum of alien machinery. Every corner, every shadow, held the promise of ambush. As they ventured deeper, Eli's scanner began to beep, alerting them to the presence of something massive in the central chamber ahead. Mira raised a hand, signaling them to halt. "Eli, what are we looking at?" she whispered. Eli examined his readouts, his face pale. "It's a weapon core. Much larger than the one we saw on Hadria. If this thing activates, it could wipe out half of Mars." Myra's heart raced. This was it, the Hadrians' endgame. If they didn't neutralize this core, it wouldn't just be Mars at risk, Earth could be next. "Can you disable it?" she asked, her voice calm but urgent. Eli grimaced. "It's possible, but there's a catch. The core is shielded by a feedback loop. I'll need to manually overload it from within. It's a one-way trip." Myra's breath caught, but she quickly masked her reaction. She looked at Eli, seeing the determination in his eyes. He was ready to sacrifice everything to protect their world. Her voice softened. "We'll find another way, Eli. We get out of here together." He shook his head, a sad smile on his face. "This is the way, Mira. They won't stop unless we stop them here and now." A weight settled over them, but Mira knew he was right. She nodded, respect and sorrow filling her gaze. "You're a damn hero, Eli." Without another word, Eli moved toward the core, his footsteps echoing through the chamber. Mira, Martinez, and Leo took defensive positions, their focus on keeping the Hadrians at bay while Eli prepared the overload. The seconds stretched into agonizing minutes as Hadrian soldiers flooded the chamber, their alien eyes filled with a cold, unfeeling determination. Myra's team fought with everything they had, each shot, each move precise, a testament to their unbreakable will. Finally, Eli's voice crackled through their calms. "It's done! Get out now!" Myra's chest tightened, but she didn't hesitate. "Fall back!" she ordered, leading her team out of the chamber. The facility trembled as the core destabilized, the walls shuddering and the floor cracking beneath them. As they reached the exit, Mira cast one last glance back, her heart heavy. Eli's silhouette remained at the core, his final act one of bravery and sacrifice. They emerged onto the Martian surface just as the facility erupted in a blinding explosion, a brilliant plume of fire and energy lighting up the sky. For a moment, it was as if the stars themselves burned in honor of Eli's sacrifice. Mira took a deep breath, her voice a whisper carried by the Martian wind. Earth lives because of you, Eli. We'll make sure they never forget. She turned to her remaining team, the weight of loss etched in their faces, but in their eyes she saw resilience, a fire that wouldn't be extinguished. They would continue, they would fight, and they would make Eli's sacrifice count. As they headed toward their dropped ship, Mira knew that this was far from over. But she also knew that humanity, bruised and battered, would rise to face whatever came next, undaunted and unyielding.